Okay, let's try this again. Welcome to Forking Off, the podcast for people who said no to just following orders, where we explore the very personal decisions behind leaving federal service, whether by choice or by force. Every departure has a story, and we're here to share them.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of Forking Off. I'm Jill Fields.
And I'm Philip Fields.
And today we have with us Allie Syverson. Hi, Allie.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't we go ahead and jump right in and Allie, give us your bluff, your bottom line up front.
I'm Allie Syverson. I used to work at the U.S. Agency for International Development from 2020 through 2025, and I worked in the environment and energy area, and I was a communication advisor, and I was let go in February of 2025, along with all of my other coworkers when the entire agency was decimated by Elon Musk. Since then, I have been pivoting to working in the arts. I'm a painter, and I have been a painter on the side for many, many years. And I've taken this opportunity to really dive into the arts and really just harness the energy from being laid off and taking the fork and putting all my energy and emotions into making art.
Tell us how you ended up at USAID, how you came to public service.
So I got into USAID in 2020. I actually started a week before the pandemic, which was crazy timing. I was a journalism undergrad, and I spent the first half of my career working in corporate social responsibility, doing a lot of grant making and public affairs for big corporations that were doing social impact work. I knew that I wanted to work in the public sector because I had some opinions about the way that private sector was doing their corporate giving. And I thought that I wanted to understand how the public sector worked too. Honestly, stumbled upon the job at USAID, which is a really unusual thing. I just saw it on a job board and cold applied. I didn't even know what USAID was when I applied for the job. I ended up getting a job on the food security team, working a lot to communicate about all the different food security programs all over the world that USAID did. Then I pivoted into the climate and environment space and worked more in the energy, infrastructure, and cities teams. I also was the lead speechwriter for the chief climate officer and did all of our big presence at the UN climate conference. I spent a lot of time abroad too within my role. I interviewed and wrote a lot of stories about people who lived in different places who were recipients of our climate and environmental programs. I spent time in Egypt and Pakistan and a few months in Fiji and the Philippines and Ghana, all over the world. It was just such a wonderful experience to be able to get to know different people and how their lives interact with our different environmental programs and seeing how climate change was affecting each one of their lives and livelihoods in different ways. It was really the dream job. And my coworkers themselves were just so brilliant. The smartest people I've ever met, the most hardworking people I've ever met. When I moved from private sector into public sector, I was worried that all these stereotypes about government workers. And then I got to USAID and I was like, whoa, this is, first of all, so fast. Everybody has such huge responsibility. Also, just the best people, a lot of people who used to be in the Peace Corps, a lot of people who used to work in nonprofit, just a bunch of people who want to do great work in the world. Everybody's so highly specialized at one specific technical thing. I learned so much about international climate policy and how all those different levers work. But then the people that we met all over the world were also incredible. The way that they are adapting their own businesses to work with the changing climate and how they're working with their communities too is really great to understand their stories and to be able to tell their stories to the rest of the world.
It's really awesome. I also am really glad to hear you say you had this preconceived notion of what a government worker was and that there was a stereotype. Every person we've interviewed, every person we've talked to has said, these are the hardest working people that I have ever worked with.
Totally. I'm from Minnesota and I went to Wisconsin. I lived in Chicago for a long time. From what I knew in the Midwest, the typical career path was, you go to university and then you go work at a Fortune 500 company, climb the career ladder until you die. Public service was never in my scope of understanding of what I could do for a career. So once I got there, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is a hidden secret of something that I just had no idea about, but it's the best. I'm grieving that's no longer an option, at least in the short term.
You mentioned you hadn't really considered USAID as an option. I did my undergraduate in international security and conflict resolution, and I specialized in environment and security. So I did this food security internship. I did a study abroad in East Africa and all of this. I didn't have any sort of idea of how I would actually turn that into a career afterwards.
Right.
I had no intentions of going to work for the FBI. The first several times somebody mentioned like you should apply there, I was like, no, I don't want to. Once I was there, I was like, oh, this is nothing like what I expected. This is actually an amazing place to be with great people.
Yeah, absolutely. Now that USAID is gone, I feel like it's part of my duty to tell the world like what USAID did and have that history notated. And so the election happened, and I kind of knew that I was going to be let go because I worked in climate. I knew that international development was maybe not a thing that the new administration was going to be a fan of. We all read Project 2025, and we knew that USAID was going to be a test case for how to dismantle the federal government. At that point, I took a pretty pessimistic view of what my future in the government was going to look like, especially being a speechwriter and somebody who had to help the top principal in my area. I knew that I was probably going to be morally unaligned with whoever was going to be put in front of me or that I would have to write speeches for. And I just knew that for myself, I wasn't going to be able to be their speechwriter. And that was a hard line that I drew. Back in November of 2024, I kind of started strategizing what I was going to do with my life if I got laid off or if I felt like I was going to have to quit from like a moral perspective. I already like came to the conclusion that I just needed to take a year off to work on my art practice since I have been showing and selling and making art for years. January comes along, nobody is appointed as the head of USAID, and we kind of were wondering, is USAID so far down on the list of priorities that we're not getting somebody named, or are they just going to wipe USAID off the map? Unfortunately, it was the latter, and nobody really knew that it was going to be to the extent that it was. The administration started on January 21st. Within 48 hours, my bosses were put on administrative leave. There was a lot of questions about why, and there weren't really any concrete reasons for it. And this was before any other agencies had gone through the ringer. USAID was the first organization to start getting cuts from the government. I think it was a week and a half into the new administration, I got pulled into this covert meeting. It was with our new political leadership. They told us all the articles I had written or that people in my area had written were going to be pulled off the internet because they mentioned women. We were told that was not in alignment with the new DEI policy because they mentioned women. So we had a few hours to tell them which web pages didn't mention women, and they were going to pull everything else out. And so we just
so crazy.
It is.
That is so crazy.
It was the most insane meeting of my life. And it was a Friday afternoon. I was just totally beat down afterwards. I remember I like wrote in my journal, I was like, democracy died today. This is the most insane thing of my career. One of my colleagues, she spent so much of her work time making these beautiful web pages. There was 250 web pages. They all just got wiped in 2 hours. And it was all because we talked about women.
That's 50% of the population. Why are there websites that don't talk about women?
Right. Well, it's because we specifically called out women. Creating jobs for women in the energy sector, that was considered a bad thing. That we were specifically having programs that were uplifting women, even though we know that in any development program, women make communities really lean into development programming. Focusing on women, it's like a better return on investment. And so all of our women-focused programming was all pulled down. And then within like a matter of a week or two, everything on the USAID website and all the data and records were wiped.
Sort of across the board, people from the military, people from the CDC, etc., all either had their work removed from government websites or are worried that it will be removed soon. Hypothetically, these things should all be going to the National Archive and be made available to the public in perpetuity. Can you talk about the impact of that on you just a little bit?
I was a speechwriter. I also wrote articles about all of these different programs. I probably published close to like 20 articles. Now, looking for a job, people ask me for writing samples. They ask for press releases. They ask for websites that I've designed. And there are no more records of these things because they are all wiped from the internet. Thankfully, in the last hours before my articles got pulled down, I was able to download them and save them and archive them. So at least I have them, but they're not out there when you search for me. And because so much of our world is online right now and a lot of things are about like public presence, if you Google my name, you're not going to see any published articles because they're all wiped from the internet. So I kind of looked like this unpublished journalist author, which is crazy when you think about hiring somebody who is a writer. For me, having all of these things taken off from the internet is like devastating. within January, we had all these different exercises to try to reframe the messaging to align under the new administration's priorities. It was to make America more safe and secure and prosperous. I had to pivot all of our messaging for all of our programs to say how they were making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous, which largely many of our programs did fit under those things with different lens to it. So I spent all of January doing that. There were also a lot of weird things happening at the same time. We would go into the office. There were people walking around taking notes on if we were actually sitting at our desks or not. They were trying to see if we were actually in the office. That was a kind of a weird big brothery thing. And then we were getting all these emails at 2:00 in the morning from the Doge squad. So we were in this perpetual fight or flight moment. I was learning a lot on the news, whether or not I was going to be with my job or not. There were so many articles that were coming out about USAID, and it was crazy because I went from nobody in my peripheral life knowing what USAID was to everybody in my life having an opinion on whether or not USAID was a good organization or not. It was crazy to have that juxtaposition. First week of February, everybody's pretty aware that we're going to go under. And that's when the fork came out. The whole time that this is happening, the fork comes out. And at first I'm like, this is a scam. The first emails that came out were they were so bare bones, not a lot of information about what was going to be all the different administrative pieces of the buyout. So at first I was like, there's no way I'm taking this. Just from a moral principle. I was like, I don't want to make a deal with the devil. I'll just go down with the ship. Then throughout the weeks, I just became more angry at the way that USAID was being dismantled in such a public and aggressive and terrible fashion. It became a very obvious thing that I needed to do from a financial perspective, because the hiring mechanism that I was in for the government, I knew I wasn't going to get any legal recourse because I was Foreign Service limited. And so I knew taking the buyout was a risk that I needed to take. It was going to help me get off the roller coaster. I just was like, I need to get out to save my mental sanity. I'm also an artist, and this could be an opportunity for me to just really go in on art while I have buyout money, I suppose, and just see how that goes. Once I took the fork, I felt immediate relief, which made me feel very bad in the moment because not that many people at USAID took the fork, which is in hindsight, not great because the majority of everybody at USAID was laid off within 2 weeks of the fork being closed. The end of February, everybody got a RIF notice. I even got a RIF notice from one of Elon Musk's 19-year-old guys. And it was an email at 2:00 in the morning or something. So at that point, I didn't know if I was actually going to be eligible for all the fork benefits since I technically got RIF. But at that point, I didn't really care. I was like, I'm out. It just felt like the only thing possible. Also, the only other thing that felt right for me to do was to just fully go into art. A week after I took the fork, I went to this art residency in Connecticut. It's called the Foundation House. They're a nonprofit and it's focused a lot on social justice and climate and environment related things. We had to come up with a project that was focused on climate social justice. And my brain was so fried after 2 months of the back and forth roller coaster. And the only thing that felt right was making a painting that was commemorating USAID, especially because so much of the story of USAID was taken off the internet. The thing that really stands the test of time is visual art. And we think about all the moments in history where there have been political upheavals throughout the whole world. When we think about history in general, we think about art. We think of the Renaissance, the hieroglyphs, all the pyramids. The visual art is what stands the test of time. And I was like, all the stories that were wiped away from USAID should be captured in a way that's truthful and honest and in a way that's honoring the 6 decades of service that people who worked at USAID dedicated into this. So many people go to school for international relations to get a job at USAID or to work in international development. And now that's just completely gone. I don't know. I felt like I needed to create a piece to honor that. I spent 2 weeks working on this painting that depicts all these different scenes from USAID's environmental work around the world. I wrote on the sides of the painting all the people who had lost their lives working for USAID. All the scenes are different places around the world for our environmental programming. So there was renewable energy in Eastern Europe. We had some water programs in the Philippines, agriculture programs in the Middle East, and then fisheries in the Pacific Islands. So all these different scenes to try to represent all the work that we did. And so I came back to DC after I finished this painting, and I knew that I wanted to just raise a lot of money from the painting to benefit all these families who got riffed when they were living abroad, and they all got evacuated back to the US with no places to go. It's raised like $15,000, which is crazy and amazing and just so great that people resonated so much with this painting. People like wanted to have an opportunity to give back, and art is something that like spoke to them, and art is totally something that's healing. It's like a force to bring people together.
You said you raised $15,000 from the sale of this, and that money was used to pay rent and
Yes. So I donated the funds to a mutual aid organization, and they distributed it to, I think it was like 6 families to pay their rent, which is really, really wonderful. So yeah, I've made hundreds and hundreds of prints of this, but I will say the original is still for sale. The original has been bopping around different exhibitions. I just had it in an exhibition in New York City with a bunch of artists who had been censored this year. It's been at a bunch of different exhibitions, but I'm trying to figure out the best place for it to land. I would love for it to be in a place that many eyes could see. Ideally, it would be like in an institution like a museum. Obviously, I feel like it should be in a place that chronicles our American history, but I also know that many museums are defunded right now and also would probably get slapped on the wrist if they took in a painting about USAID. Either way, the painting is still for sale, and if anybody has any leads of where you think that it should be, I would love to chat.
the painting is on your website, which we will have a link to in the show notes. I have to say, looking through your artwork, you can feel so much of the emotion. It's such a part of you, but it's such a part of all of us.
I appreciate that. So I moved out of DC at the end of March. I put all my stuff in storage, and I knew that I just wanted to have like an art sabbatical year, but I also needed time to like get my nervous system back to normal and rest, kind of think a little bit more strategically about what I wanted to do for the rest of the year. I ended up going to Spain for like 40 days, which was wonderful, but I was going to walk the Camino to just try to get some perspective, but unfortunately my foot was broken. So I ended up just spending like 40 days in Spain, just eating and looking at beautiful things, and I painted every day when I was in Spain, which was such a wonderful thing to keep me grounded and to just have some semblance of routine amongst the chaos. I painted every day when I was there, like little scenes of what I was looking at in Spain. While I was there, I applied for like a bunch of different art residencies. The painting from the American people kind of took off in a viral way, and I got a lot of different opportunities from that, which I'm so thankful for. So I came back from Spain eventually. I ended up doing an art residency in upstate New York for 2 months in the summer. It's at this place called Hilltown Commons, which is also focused on community and connection. It was a very transformative experience to understand what full-time artistry looks like, and also making paintings for this upcoming solo exhibition that I had in Florida. So this one woman who used to work at USAID, her husband runs the Warehouse Arts District in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they wanted to have an exhibition about USAID. So they reached out to me while I was in Spain, actually, and asked if I would create an exhibition for September. And so I focused all of my summer at art residency making paintings for this exhibition and coming up with what the story would look like. Ultimately, the exhibition was called The Unraveling of USAID. It was commentary about the agency and the history of the agency, and also where we go from here. And so there were 4 different sections. The first section was destruction. Second section was rest. The third section was rerouting. And then the last section was regrowth. So the stages of destruction and then what we do next. I did a lot of paintings that had like a lot of ecological symbolism in it to represent both the regrowth stage and the rerouting. It was incredibly powerful to not only create paintings for this exhibition, but also to watch the community interact with it. Being in Florida, a lot of people are disconnected from like a geographical framework from what USAID is, or like knowing of what USAID is. So I felt like it was a great opportunity to have it in Florida so I could do some education about what the agency was and what the ramifications are from a worldwide basis that the agency is no longer there. And it was so incredibly powerful. On opening night, I was like sitting on this piano bench and watching people perceive my art. And there were so many people that just stood in front of my paintings and cried. And I've never experienced anything like that before. It was crazy. It was like watching people reopen the emotions that I had put on canvas a year ago. I made this one painting 2 days after the election, and I titled it The Purge because there was all this discourse about how Trump was going to purge federal workers. And so I like made this painting with my body instead of paintbrushes because I was just had like so much pent up energy. And it's this big, dark, scary red and black and blue painting. And I hung it with a bunch of chainsaw chains. So very dark and very visceral. And so many people just like stood in front of it and cried, grieving whatever 2025 meant for them. But it was so incredibly powerful. I'm thankful for the Warehouse Arts District for having my exhibition there. I just made so many great connections from that, which was really, really wonderful. And then the USAID painting traveled to New York after that exhibition. I went there as well. It was a bunch of artists that were censored this year for whatever art that they had put in museums. Some museums have been pulling back on different art exhibitions because if they're tied into politics, they are worried that their funding is going to get pulled. And so a lot of people's art have been taken down because of that. It was a really important exhibition to have, and unfortunately, very timely as things just continue to get pulled down.
You hear a lot of people talk about the censorship of speech and the chilling effect that the government has had, but it resonates down to art. And art is one thing that I wouldn't have immediately thought, oh, art is going to be censored because there can be so many different meanings to a piece of art. But it is a form of expression. It is a form of speech. To see that there is a chilling effect, it's scary that even in an expressive manner, it's being tamped down.
Totally. It sets a really scary precedent. And of course, artists can make art that is political in nature. The way the art world works is galleries and museums that make an artist well known or get artists on the radar in the big art scene. A lot of these pieces that were censored are at big museums. There was an artist who was supposed to have his exhibition at the Art Museum of the Americas, which is in DC, and they pulled down his entire exhibition, and it was in the spring. Also, this one other artist, he's a DC artist, Andrea Lamaro. He was like a climate artist, and he was sponsored by GW to do all these different climate-focused works, and it was also in tandem with the Washington Post. He was supposed to have all these different opinion articles written, and the Washington Post canceled his contract halfway through the year after he was supposed to get funded for the whole year. People are being defunded. Their work is being pulled down because of the subject matter that they're making art about. That's devastating to think about from a revolutionary perspective, too. When we think about every political upheaval, there's always some kind of revolutionary art showing the people's movement. A lot of it is being censored right now.
I think what is surprising to me about it, I don't expect certain people to appreciate or support the art, but we've seen in these other industries where companies that have close financial ties with the government, they've been severely impacted. I'm critical of anybody who is willing to succumb to that kind of pressure. I personally think that we all need to be pushing back harder.
Yeah.
The idea of a museum or a gallery succumbing to that totally takes me by surprise. I never would have expected it.
Yes. There's also another artist that I wanted to talk about that was in the exhibition that I was in New York. Her name is Danielle Seawalker. She's an Indigenous artist. She was supposed to have an art residency in the city of Vail. Her residency was all ready to go. Somebody looked back at her Instagram, like from months ago, and she had made a painting that was about the genocide in Palestine. And then they pulled her residency. That also just shows how much our internet footprint is being looked at right now and how we're being perceived based on words that we're putting online. Ultimately, she ended up having a lawsuit against the city of Vail and she won, I think. But her summer plans for her art residency were ruined because they didn't like the stance that she was taking about the genocide, which is crazy.
Yeah, I expect this. It's not okay, but I expect this of like the Smithsonian, right? Which is heavily influenced, it shouldn't be, but is reliant on and therefore has the potential to be influenced by the administration.
Right.
It's still not okay. I can't recall many, if any, times in the past where I've thought, oh, the Smithsonian is going to take down that exhibit because the president doesn't like it.
Right.
But outside of DC, especially, it's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's wild. And so it's funny, it's funny, but it's not funny. All the industries that I specialize in right now are under fire. I worked in climate. Obviously, that is defunded right now, and it is a mess. International development is no longer a career path at all. 20,000 American jobs have been lost in the United States because of the collapse of USAID and the foreign aid industry. And over 230,000 jobs have been lost worldwide because of USAID's decimation. A lot of companies have had to fold or have gone bankrupt or have had to lay people off because they no longer have funding from USAID. And so just the entire industry is decimated. I can't stress that enough. So many people go into this career path and it's just no longer a thing that people can rely on. I have some friends that live in Australia that I met them when I was posted in the Pacific Islands. They were telling me that just the other day there were more layoffs because of USAID funding cuts. So it's these people across the world from me are dealing with the ramifications of USAID being closed. Obviously, I feel it so deeply in my own personal life, but like it's deeper than that. It's the whole partner community around the world, but also all the communities that we had programs in. The quick pullout of USAID from all these communities has been devastating. People are no longer receiving food aid. They were receiving medications from USAID regularly, and then they just don't have medicine anymore. It's just this terrible ripple effect. All the industries that I'm in are defunded. It's environmental, international aid community is gone. And then also, I pivot into the arts. The arts always struggle, but like if they're struggling more than normal. It's hard for me to understand what the path forward is when all these things that I specialize in and quote unquote expert in have been blown up this year.
Yeah. And the labor market across industries is really rough right now. On top of all of that, now, people are having to look at, in addition to their competition, like even if I were able to get this job, like, is this really a company where I'm going to feel safe? Am I going to feel like I'll be targeted for it? Or like the company will be targeted for me being part of it? And will the company feel compelled to remove me because they have to protect their bottom line? Because this has been happening a lot.
Yeah, totally. I think about that, and like I have obviously put a target on me this year. I've made a painting that was about USAID. I had a solo exhibition for art that was like anti-Doge and like anti the things that this administration has done. I've put it all over the internet. It's obvious like where my thoughts lie, and so any employer that's going to employ me will know that's like a risk that they're taking. But also I know that like any place that I want to work would embrace that viewpoint. And so it's like an interesting exercise this year thinking about what comes next from like a career standpoint. It's been amazing being a full-time artist this year. It's been so enjoyable. I feel like I've learned so many things about myself and just deconstructing the way that a day feels. When we work 9-to-5 jobs, we like organize our routines and lives around that. But as an artist, like those rules go out the window and you can make your day whatever you want it to be, which is such a beautiful thing. The unfortunate thing is like as an artist, it's very volatile in terms of sales. You also have to like sell out to like social media to like get sales. And that also is like a very icky thing to me. Health insurance is a thing to think about. It's just like, it's really volatile. I'm at this space where I'm like trying to figure out how I can meld both things together, like do something in communications, maybe something in environmentalism. I'm also like thinking about doing communications for like arts and culture organizations. So how can I like both do communications for some kind of progressive social issue and also keep doing my art on the side? And that's like a perennial question in my mind about how I can balance both and feel good about both things. I moved back to Minnesota, which is where I'm from originally. I feel like all year I was trying to figure out where to go and where to land. And the only thing that kept feeling right was being close to my family and close to the friends that I've had for my whole life, because that's like the one stable variable in my life right now. Everything else is like so up in the air that I felt like being by the people who are stable in my life feels like a good grounding force. And I'm living in my parents' basement now. So I'm like doing the multiple searching of things right now. Searching for a home. I'm searching for a job, understanding how to like make community in a place that has been my forever home also. And it's just like all the variables are up in the air at the exact same time, which is exciting, but also it's a lot at the same time too. I do feel fortunate that I took the fork because I feel like it gave me the financial stability throughout the year to like both heal myself, have some adventure, really dive into art, and be able to like think strategically about my next step instead of having to like panic, get a new job right away. I feel like taking the fork made all the difference in like being able to have like a good, happy, healthy mindset throughout the year, despite having my entire life implode within a matter of weeks in January.
There's a really fulfilling sense of irony to be able to take this experience that was meant to be a punishment or like used against people who didn't agree and make something valuable.
Totally.
Yeah, like make something out of it.
Yeah, I feel a few ways about it. I feel survivor's guilt in a way. I mean, I don't know how many people at USA took the fork, but like I'm in a group chat of people who forked and there's only like 45 people in it. There's only a select few of us that took it, and the rest of everybody got riffed way earlier and lost their paychecks way earlier than we did. And I feel guilty about that, because then I was able to like travel and make art and relax when other people were worrying about their bills. And that makes me feel really bad. I did grapple with that decision for quite a long time. I also feel very grateful that I took it. And I feel like Work was a lot of my purpose before, like working for USAID, like for the public sector, working on climate issues abroad, like gave me so much purpose in my day-to-day life. And I'm so thankful that I have something that I'm interested in that gives me purpose too. Like art gives me so much purpose from a personal standpoint, but also creating impactful art that makes people like move to tears is like so purposeful to me. Thinking about like my future of art versus communications, my show that I had in September really framed it for me that the thing I need to keep in mind is like always making art that is meant to like move people and impactful art that's telling a story rather than for the sake of selling. I think that that's like a really important framing because that's what brings the most purpose and joy is moving people through storytelling.
And I feel that when you actually are putting your heart and soul into it, it comes through.
Totally.
Whereas if you're doing something specifically for the
Yeah,
paycheck.
totally. And that's why I feel like right now I'm like looking for quote unquote real job. So then I don't feel like I have to be pressed to sell the art that I make. I can make more impactful art. Yeah, without like needing to hustle it out.
Yeah.
Who knows?
We've had a little bit of a similar struggle of balance doing this podcast. You know, we're not monetizing it. We're not really making anything. We've sunk some time and money into it. We want to keep it going, but we want to be able to do it without having to, like, we've had to embrace some of the icky social media stuff just to make it known to people.
Yeah.
We don't want to have to like do paywalls and things like that because your story isn't one for us to sell, right?
Right.
But yeah, like we've been struggling with, okay, but how do we actually pay for food?
Life.
Yeah. How do we pay for living and groceries?
Yeah, I'm gonna go like off on an art tangent here. And I know that like so many of the people who listen to this podcast are like probably not artists or like in the arts world, but maybe this is interesting for them to hear. But I feel like I've like learned so much about the arts industry this year. And like I lived with musicians and photographers and people from all different parts of the arts industry. And it's crazy like how hard all these people work, but they just don't get the social structures that people who work a salaried job do. I feel like this year, like I worked harder than any other year of my life. Every minute of my day, I'm thinking about art, what I can do next from like a creative standpoint. Whereas like with any other salaried job that I've worked for the past 10 years, I like try to shut my brain off at 5 p.m. to like save my brain from being stressed out. Artists like are thinking about their art at all times. And it's like, they're like the most underpaid people in our entire like job ecosystem when like really arts is like what makes life worthwhile. And like think of our world without art, that would be boring and like white walls. And I don't know, I don't want to live in a world without art. And it's too bad that they don't get the paychecks and the benefits that I think that they deserve. There are some countries that are starting to do like universal basic income for artists, which I think is so cool. There's like a recent case study in Ireland. Go look it up. Yeah, artists like offer quite a lot. It's also impossible to be a full-time artist. There's like a lot of dichotomy there.
Yeah. And art is what survives.
It's the history of our world. Art like really encapsulates all the different periods of our world. We wouldn't know the history and we wouldn't know any of the world's history without it. It's very important, and it's very important to support the arts and like support original art and not AI art. Sorry, I know that AI is so like big right now, but AI is like also ruining the art. People listen to the podcast. If you ever have the option to get original art versus AI art, I encourage you to find a real human artist to get your arts done, whether that's graphic design, music for the background of whatever you're looking for, or paintings. I encourage you to like buy original local art instead of Amazon art or whatever.
We support that too. We absolutely support that too.
Love to hear that. I love to hear that.
All right. So Allie, last question. Would you ever go back to federal service?
I think I would. I feel like right now, the thing that I've been doing has been like dissociating quite a lot to save my brain. So the thought of like rebuilding is really nauseating to me. But there are some people that are doing it, and I respect them so much for it, and I appreciate them for that. Specifically for international aid, it's going to take forever to put that system back together. Whatever the next administration is, I have a really hard time believing that that's going to be put together within a few years. Yeah, I think like if there ever is a world in which it comes back, I think I would absolutely consider it. I loved working in public service. I loved working for the government. I thought it was wonderful and great. I just don't know if there's ever going to be an option for me to do it. Right now, DC feels like the bad place a little bit to me, if you've ever seen that show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's such a roller coaster of a place right now, and I just needed to get out. Like maybe in the future, if there is international development or like some kind of international work that aligns with wherever I'm at that point in my life, I think I would absolutely consider it. But now it's a little bit scary because I felt like working for the government was like, such a stable choice from like a job security perspective. And now I'm like, wow, I was totally proved wrong that it was very unstable.
Allie, thank you so much for joining us today. And we wish you all the best and to be able to continue doing your art and sharing and impacting the world. So thank you so much. And thanks for forking off with us.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Forking Off. To our listeners still in government, remember, your integrity is worth more than your TSP. Leaving doesn't mean giving up on public service. It just means finding new ways to serve.
Until next time,
keep your ethics,
keep your dignity,
and we'll keep telling these stories.
If you're a former Fed with a story to tell, or you're wrestling with your own ethical crossroads, reach out to us at info@forkingoff.com.
Today's episode was created, produced, and edited by Jill and Philip Fields. Special thanks to our guest, Allie Syverson. You can find more information about this episode at forkingoff.com. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Mastodon, LinkedIn, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Join us Monday, December 22nd.
As we talk with Madeline Velturo, former State Department employee and host of YouTube sensation, Former Feds and Friends.
I worked really hard to build that career for myself, and it came crumbling down in 4 months. I can't believe I'm 36 years old, and they're like, what is your plan? I'm like, my plan is to start a YouTube channel, and I don't really have a plan after that. I'm just embracing the young side because I don't know. I feel like I've been a little, betrayed might be too strong a word, definitely let down by the advice of the elders. It's also just been really hard having the skill set that I have and watching the last few months of politics, political violence in America, and divisiveness and these things. Being a stability expert, I don't want to say nobody's safe. That sounds really bad. Like, I've known people who left government who have already gotten second jobs, and those second jobs have already gone away. We're in a very unstable situation economically. I've studied enough economics in fragile states to know that economic shocks are a coming. They're like, what's your plan? And I'm like, our plan is to survive.